Hello everyone and welcome along once again to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. A lot to chat about the weekend just gone in the sport of horse racing, and also a good week ahead which finishes with a good meeting, fingers crossed, with runners at Newbury. Sam Turner is once again back in the studio. He's rushed back to replace Gavin Lynch this week.
Well, I saw how good he was last week. I thought I can't let that carry on.
Fair enough.
So he's been kicked off, Gav. We'll have him back though. He's good, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was very good. But he didn't have the opportunity to talk about some very interesting subjects over the weekend. We'll get to it in a minute, but just you wake up on a Monday morning in the sport of horse racing. How do you feel about it?
A little bit worried, concerned. I think we're in a little bit of a precarious situation with the language that was perhaps used over the weekend by one or two individuals. So we had a Saturday walkover at Ascot. I mean, God, you've got to be 185 years old to remember one of those. And I know I looked at some days, but I've never seen anything like that, you know, a walkover at Ascot on a Saturday afternoon. I mean, the paying public who walked through the gates, and there weren't that many of them on Saturday, which was worrying. Were treated to a meeting that was pretty modest.
Yes, an extraordinary weekend in the sport of horse racing. Later on in the show, we will have Donald McCain, of course, trained 155 winners last season as a guest on Racing Weekly. But now on the show, it's time for Racing Recap. So let's start with the big race of last weekend, and that came at Haydock. It was the Betfair Chase, and the first thing to talk about is the disappointment, I believe, of A Plus Tard, because I don't think you could take the result of what Protectorat did without the context of the fact that the Gold Cup winner was poor.
Never looked happy, really, did he? He was just always a little bit slovenly, sluggish, didn't have a cut at his fences early on, didn't seem to travel with any fluency. Just wasn't the horse that we sort of know and love. Certainly not the horse that sprinted 15 lengths clear of his Gold Cup field after the last, back in March. So that was disappointing. But put in the context of the data that we see from Saturday, the overall time figure, the circuit time, that all stacks up very well. The fact that Protectorat saw the race out very strongly. We had a good yardstick in second, Eldorado Allen. It gives us a race that we can sort of rate around him as regards to Brave Man's Game. We can start to find out where we are with the 3 milers in this country for sure. I don't think the ground was quite as soft as it was given. The going allowance was probably more soft-sided good for the second year in succession as well, because reading the comments that Darryl Jacobs said before last year's renewal, that it was more good to firm than good to soft, and I think that is a worrying trend that's sort of slipping into more and more races these days and race meetings these days, that perhaps the going descriptions aren't perhaps as accurate as some of the practitioners think that they should be. But Protectorat was tremendous. Love his head carriage. And I think the difference that I saw on Saturday, it might be the smaller field, it might be the flatter track, but the difference I saw Saturday from, say, he's running the Gold Cup was just the way that he jumped, you know. And Harry Skelton just had to keep taking him.
Without
he pinged everything. He was a bit scruffy over the first circuit at Cheltenham last year, but was still a length clear of A Plus Tard going to the second last, but he had gone wide throughout and rubbed 1 or 2 on the first circuit, and he was a bit keen. He was a bit keen Saturday, but he saw the trip out really well.
I think that's him when he's at his best. He probably wants to do a little bit too much, but he is enthusiastic, isn't he? I wanted to ask you about the Gold Cup picture, obviously, because the market has changed enormously after that one race. So A Plus Tard, who was favourite, I think he was around 4-1 in a place. He's out to 12-1 with Bet365 for the Gold Cup. And now Galopin de Champs is the 9-4 favourite. Protectorat 8-1, L'Empresse 9-1, Allaho 10s, A Plus Tard 12, Brave Man's Game 16. I mean, having thought that it was A Plus Tard, maybe Allaho's, and now obviously Galopin de Champs. Now we've got a couple of British trained chasers in the top 3 in the market with Bet365.
Absolute scenes. It's great. I mean, and you know with Protectorat, he's going to be trained specifically, you know, given connections, given the way that they target races. He might run in the Cotswold Chase. Personally, I shouldn't be advertising this, but if I backed him, I'd be happy just to see him ship up in March.
Of course you would.
And I wonder whether he might do.
Of course you would.
I think the prices that were on offer are 8-1 Bet365. I think he's 12 elsewhere. I think that's a tall price. Looking at the data Saturday and the figure that he clocked on Saturday, Yeah, he was a touch disappointing his finishing effort at Cheltenham last year, but he belted the last, clouted the last, and could only find the one pace up the hill as a Plutard stroke, majestically clear. But I thought that was a freak performance last year. I couldn't believe what I was watching at the time, and I still can't believe it watching it back now. So can a Plutard ever be in that form again in the rest of his career? I'm not so sure.
Okay, so questions for a Plutard to answer, but at least Protectorat is on the right...
I think his value at 12. You know, if you can get that, I think that's...
And he's still a young horse. I mean, he's only a year younger than a Plutard, but you know, he does have that little bit of improvement. You feel Connections did seem to think he'd improved, you know, with a bit more time.
Well, he's learning on the job, but the round that he put together, the fluency and the proficiency he showed at his fences, and the fact that he was taking half a length out of some good jumpers, Bristol de Mai, Eldorado Allen. I mean, he's absolutely trounced him. And I know people will say, well, yeah, but it's not the Irish form. And I do think Galopin de Champ's a beast. That's the caveat.
Yeah.
But Protectorat has laid down a decent marker there.
All right. Connections of Protectorat, or the owners of Protectorat, also had a very good winner on the same day in the graduation chase, and that was Hitman. The thing that struck me about Hitman earlier in the week was that Paul Nicholls had suggested that had Protectorat not been a potential runner in the Betfair Chase, he would have run Hitman in that race. He would have had a go at that, which therefore suggested to me that he sees Hitman as a potential King George and ultimately maybe a Gold Cup horse. He might be King George Ryanair, I don't know, but I was really impressed with Hitman. Yeah,
I mean, he was, from the first and the back straight to the line, he was 12 lengths quicker than Protectorat on the circuit. Obviously, they'd gone a little bit more of a dawdle, and he only went 2.5 as opposed to 3. And Bristol de Mai did set a searching test in the Betfair Chase. So I thought it was a nice performance. I thought he dominated well. He looked a happy horse in front. Now, whether he's allowed to dictate like that as he goes up in grade, that's a question mark. There were one or two people questioning his bravery at Ascot. I thought that was a touch harsh. That race is working out quite well already, the old Rowan. And I think he was entitled to blow up a little bit. As Paul Nicholls is adamant to stress, he's only 6, going on 7. He's still a young horse. He's a bit like Clan-des-Obeaux in a lot of respects. He showed a fair bit of class early on, and has just taken the time, as a lot of Paul's horses do, just taking a little bit of time just to realise his potential. But he
does let them race to find their way.
Well, that does help, doesn't it?
Generally.
It does help.
It's a good thing.
So he's going to have a really strong two-pronged attack. Now, all the money in the past week was for Galopin de Champ and the King George, but apparently Willie Mullers is cool on that idea.
So Brave Man's Game, the 5-4 favourite with Bet365 for the King George. Galopin de Champ, 11-4. I think, did he get down even shorter than that?
9-4 in a place, I think.
Envoy Allen 6-1. Hitman in at 6-1 now. L'Empresse 13-2. Last year's winner, Tornado Flyer 7-1.
I still think Brave Man's Game is, the betting dictates that, and I still think he's the number one choice in the stable. But Hitman's a lovely second string to have, and we've seen it before with Paul, that sometimes the second string obliges in that race.
I mean, his record in the King George, not just obviously Corto Star, but, Silvianarco Conti, Clan-des-Obeaux, etc. It suggests that he knows what he's doing with that race, and he believes that there's not much between Hitman and Brave Man's Game, and he actually thinks Harry Cobden might have a difficult decision to make who to ride, and one's 5-4, the other is 6-1.
Probably Harry will probably tell you that he hasn't got a difficult decision to make, but diplomatically he might have to. You've got a horse that's proven at Kempton, a horse that's proven over 3 miles, and went round Kempton on rails last year. So I'm not sure it's a difficult decision. All right, okay. I'm a big Hitman fan. That's why. Yeah. So am I.
I'm actually interested as well. He's 50-1 for the Gold Cup with Bet365 at the moment.
Could be a tidy price, couldn't it? I think it's nice to see those colours. John Hales, Jed Mason, Sir Alex Ferguson, with 2 really, really top class, potentially top class horses. Protectorat and Hitman to go to war with this year. Great.
All right.
Good for the sport to have someone of that magnitude involved.
The Stairs Handicap Hurdle was won by Botox Has. It was a very good weekend for trainer Gary Moore. A good day for Caelan Quinn as well, the rider. He's 12-1 Bet365 for the Pertemps final at the Cheltenham Festival. I thought there were some really good runs in behind. I really like Run for Oscar's run as well.
Yeah, that was a handy run. I fancied Mai Tai. He must have taken 3 or 4 hurdles with him as souvenirs.
He travelled nicely, didn't he? But
unless you can jump, in amongst a pack like that, then you're never going to have a chance. Connections got a little bit of compensation with Boot Hill down at Ascot, but that was a disappointing effort for him. Run for Oscar ran very nicely, didn't he? And it was a good performance from the winner, and advertised the the skills of Caelan Quinn again. He'd looked good on a number of occasions previous to that, but on a big Saturday horse, he had a good week. I think he had Bobo Mac for Tom Simmons as well, so he had a good week.
And Gary Moore, who had a winner on the Friday at Ascot with Larry, also had Goshen. Now, of course, Goshen benefited for the non-appearance of Constitution Hill in the Ascot hurdle.
Heavy ground horse, Goshen, isn't it?
Yeah. But happy to go on the ground at Ascot on the weekend.
Yeah. It just depends which camp you're in, doesn't it? I mean, it's very difficult. I can certainly understand Nicky Henderson's reluctance to run. You know, they walked the track. They thought it was good to firm in the straight, the connections. And if they believe that, I'm not sure some of the terminology afterwards was particularly helpful. The ground wasn't unsafe. And by saying one or two things that they did, that's inferring that other people are reckless with the horse's well-being. And I don't think that is right. You know, the majority of people thought that it was safe enough on the hurdles track. The chase course, a little different. Yeah. You know, Alan King's had a number of horses that have been to Ascot this year and they've come back with problems. So you can understand. It does make you think, well, why was Edwardstone entered in the first place, really, if you've got those reservations? But they obviously thought that the rain would come and make it safe. And it's just drying out so quickly. The rain's not permeating. It's just sitting on the top. And unfortunately, I'm no master of course and turf management, but unfortunately, it's only the top sort of 6 or 7 inches that are seeing any dampness. Yeah,
well, and that obviously has led us to now consider the ground for Newbury this coming weekend.
Big worry.
And already Keith Otterson is already talking about the danger of potentially having quick ground, having to water in at this point of November. I mean, water in the ground.
Ridiculous.
It's unheard of. But just going back to the Constitution Hill, and I'll pick up on the quote. I mean, Nicky Henderson said, I believe he was chatting to Matt Chapman on Sky Sports Racing, and his quote was, if I'd run Constitution Hill on Saturday, he would be in his box for the next year, wounded. And that's a pretty serious allegation to lay at the ground that Ascot has provided. Now, subjectivity, I understand, is huge in determining ground. You know, very often, if you're working on the racing, they'll say, go and find out what the ground's like from the jockeys who rode in the first race. And you stand there, jockeys are coming back in, and one says it's good ground, one says it's good to soft, the other one says it's a bit dead, the other one says it's riding a little on the far side. It's such a subjective thing. It's very difficult to argue against what Nicky Henderson feels about the ground. Yeah. It's also hard to argue against what other people are saying about the ground. You know, whether Gary and Jamie Moore thought it was absolutely fine for a heavy ground horse like Goshen.
So should we then open the discussion, the conversation for having, I know we have an inspector of courses, you know, south and north, I think, you know, that was what I was led to believe. But what about 3 independent clerk of the courses that all have their designated tracks, and they become, you know, very involved with the course management of those tracks. I know it's extra expense that racing can't afford, but I think sometimes we're going to need an independent view because, as you say, everybody has a different view. Now, if you have an impartial, independent view, and they can agree, you know, whether that's, you know, through using turf tracks, for using a stick, using whatever process, as long as it's consistent, then perhaps practitioners could then start to have a little bit of confidence in these courses and where they're going and where they're going to run horses.
That's the problem. It's the having the confidence in the ground to be as described.
Well, why not just tell it as it is? You know, I mean, there have been 1 or 2 inferences that, you know, it has been glossed over the quickness of certain tracks recently. Yeah. I think 1 or 2 tracks have been a bit unlucky as well, I've got to be honest. And we've had such a dry and arid summer that the water table is so low at these venues that the moisture's just disappearing overnight. It's crazy.
Just to accentuate the point about what happened on Saturday. So Constitution Hill's out, L'Empresse's out, Edwardstone came out.
I wrote a piece in the Mail for Saturday morning.
Tipped those 3, did you?
Saying the national hunt season has arrived today. Last week at Cheltenham was perhaps a phony war, and we're going to see all the stars. Yeah. And then bomb, bomb, bomb.
They all come out. We had a 2-runner race for the Hearst, or the 1965 chase, where Cool Cody beat St Calvados. Yes. There was a walkover, as you have already alluded to. What about those people? And I think it was under 10,000, 9,000 and change.
A friend of mine went and said it was the lowest gate that he'd ever seen at Ascot on a Saturday afternoon.
But what about the people that did turn up at Ascot? What about the people who saw what was coming, bought a ticket to go racing to see that, turned up there. Those horses didn't run. What was left was a paltry offering.
Is it 23 runners? Was it something
what's their recourse for compensation?
Well, let's hope that the racecourse do offer them something, because these are new customers probably. Saturday afternoon crowd is slightly different sometimes, isn't it? Okay, you get your big Cheltenham days where it's probably a lot of ad sort of dynamic, between 20 and 60 racing fans or
age.
Guinness fans, yeah. But you get quite a lot of families at those sort of days at Ascot, don't you, and stuff. And if that was your first introduction to horse racing, where you think you're going to see a potential superstar, irrespective of whether he should or shouldn't have run, what was left was, as you say, paltry. Feel sorry for the bookmakers on course. They probably took a couple of fivers between them.
I think a couple of bookmakers turned around and went home, didn't they?
Wow, very wise. Very wise. Why would you stay?
Yeah.
This is a project. This is the product that we're trying to offer people on a Saturday afternoon on terrestrial television. It's not good enough, is it?
No. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's
something
move on.
positive.
I mentioned Cool Cody.
Yes.
What a racehorse. Admittedly, what an opportunity to win again.
It was. What opportunity for Maxi as well to win a Grade 2 at Ascot, 2-7 to win it in South Calvados. But unfortunately, the horse took off with him a little bit, was a bit keen and free, and Cool Cody picked up the pieces. But nice to see the old boy scoring.
Yeah.
Was it 18 months since he'd run away from Cheltenham or something like
11
that?
11 starts, I think he'd been running.
Cheltenham.
Yeah. He might well do. The Edwardstone was supposed to run in that Hurst Park handicap chase, didn't run. Boot Hill won. I thought he is a horse that we got to keep on the right side of going forward. He's always been highly regarded. He has a bit like Mai Tai, isn't it? As we talked last week, that these horses were very favourably mentioned for a number of years, and he's starting to realise his potential. Big growth horse that was probably biding his time over hurdles a little bit and just kicking out the ground and not respecting them, but that was just his third chase start, I think. He'd been pretty foot perfect at Newton Abbot. It's only a small run of race, but that was working out quite nicely, that race. Perhaps more of that later. And, I just like the way that he sort of coped with that, and obviously Connections were happy to run him. Should we have a quick word about the Morgiana hurdle in Ireland?
Yeah.
State Man beat Sharjah, Saldir.
Pretty uncompetitive fare.
6-1 for the champion hurdle state man.
Yeah, I probably.
One or two people criticise his jumping.
He's a little bit careful, a little bit cautious, I think. He's no make a stand, put it that way. No. But I think that can be brushed up on. He's obviously got a massive engine. I love his head carriage. He sauntered around that county hurdle, he was kept wide. But he jumped pretty well in the main amongst a 20-runner field there, admittedly in lane 8. It's just his 6th start. You do feel he's a bit of a work in progress, but I think if anyone can get him to Cheltenham a little bit more proficient over hurdles, it's probably Willie Mullins. But if he wasn't truly wound up at the weekend, there's a hell of a lot to work with.
Well, I think a man who trained Forheen, Annie Power, and Hurricane Fly knows.
He's not bad, is he?
How to get horses jumping for the champion.
The raw materials there. In similar way, he's a little bit similar to Vauban in that they don't look natural hurdlers. I think this will be a smashing chaser. He's a big horse, isn't he? He's a big unit, big beast of a thing, and that he's only had 6 starts as well. Now whether he can cope with another beast from the Henderson camp and the reigning champ as well, who's pretty proficient over hurdles as a main, is open to question, but adds further strength to that division, and we've been crying out for that, haven't we?
Indeed, the champion hurdle division has suddenly come alive in the last 6 to 8 months. But you mentioned, and a beautiful link about what he might be over fences. Well, what about John Bon, who was very good over hurdles? Only horse to beat him is Constitution Hill over hurdles, and he had his chasing debut in your neck of the woods, and it was very smart, very smart. But should he be 2-1 favourite for the Arkle? Should he be that short?
I don't think so. There's much better 2-1 chances to work your way through between now and March. But
what has happened to anti-post betting?
Yeah, it has died a death a little bit, hasn't it? Unfortunately, not going to attract much. Well, you wouldn't think he's going to attract much attention at 2-1, and bookmakers, they do go on the defensive. I mean, State Man beat Sharjah and was cut from 9-1 to 6-1 on a lot of books. Did he really deserve that?
No.
He was expected to win. It was 4-9 anyway. He won by 4 lengths. He looked a little bit more workmanlike than exhilarating, to be honest, and yet he still got cut 3 points. So it's a bit of a joke, really. And you'd be happy. I think you would be happy as a layer to take, allow people to bet a 2-1 with you for John Bond, wouldn't you? Even though he was electric, he's the only horse that apparently can keep tabs with the beast that is Constitution Hill at 7 Barrows. They've got nobody else that can get near it. He's obviously a terrific prospect for fences this year.
He is indeed. He is exciting, but I definitely think that 2-1 anti-post market.
It's an over-exaggeration, isn't it? You know, Montmoral is probably more a 2.5 mile or a big galloping track 2 mile. Warwick just happened a bit too quick for him, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be the plan originally. He was going to go to Cheltenham, but of course they switched attention. And speaking of anti-post quotes, I mean, Tamaras, who won for Paul Nicholls on the weekend at Haydock, he got a quote. I think got a quote of 16-1 for the Supreme Novices Hurdle off the bat. I know it was an all right race. It was a listed Novices Hurdle at Haydock, but 16-1 for the Supreme now. I mean,
yeah, exactly. But what price do you put him in? I suppose. I quite like the performance because I didn't think the track suited him especially. He was sort of just niggle and came back on the bridle.
I actually thought
he'd be a nice effort.
16-1 maybe for the Ballymore. I might have let him have that.
Yeah. He jumps pretty well in the main, doesn't he? I think the horse of Lucinda Ross's is quite Snakebite, is it? That's quite highly regarded. You know, was a little unfortunate, fluffed one in the straight just as he was moving into contention.
Bet365 have Tamaras at 25-1 for what it's worth.
Snake roll, not Snakebite, obviously. Thinking of my drink while I'm watching England Iran. But no, I like the performance. But yeah, I think the Tolworth Hurdle. I think that'll be a good barometer of how good he could be. But he's got a nice raft of novices, hasn't he, Mr. Nicholls? Yes. 1 or 2 of them might turn up at Cheltenham this year. Young horses,
all important. He's always said that turnover is extremely important with his to keep him at the top of the game. So.
Nom Feely, his racing syndicates.
Doing all right?
Yeah.
Was there anything else on the weekend that you wanted to mention?
Thames Water, the bumper winner at Ascot. That was another young horse from the Nicholls camp that he was happy to run. And
25-1 for the champion bumper with Bet365.
Yeah. Fair enough price, I suppose. It could
Queen's Gamble's
be
in
anything.
there, so
Queen's Gamble's in there, yeah.
She'll take care of business.
I know. I wondered how you'd managed to engineer her into a conversation, even when she hasn't run or hasn't got an entry.
Salute to Queen's Gamble.
She was terrific though, wasn't she, at Cheltenham?
Superb. Okay, so will that bring a close?
I think that's
to a close our racing.
I think that's the racing recapped.
There it is. He's going to be sitting in this seat soon with links like that. Well, delighted to welcome Donald McCain to the show, a man who trained 155 winners last season, currently operating at a 23% strike rate, the same as when he trained those 155 winners last season, more than 60 winners already. Donald, welcome to Racing Weekly's podcast. How are things going at the moment?
Morning, yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, just still, as with everyone else, just really trying to get going properly. It sounds silly in middle of back end of November, but we're just trying to get rolling,
Well, we might just pick you up on that because, of course, Sam and I have just been talking about all the racing on the weekend, and clearly it's a big talking point. I just wanted to get your take as a professional, as a trainer, someone who's been in the game your whole life, on what you made of all those withdrawals at Ascot on the weekend.
Now you start me. I just don't think it's good enough, Rishi, to be honest. I think the race courses, there's never any comeback if they get things wrong. We all talk about the weather and the weather can change and that sort of stuff, but the number of times as racing professionals supposedly that we take horses to the races and things aren't as described or things change quicker and you can't run a horse or the ground changes beyond all recognition to not perform at the level you should be doing that, and there doesn't seem to be any recourse, any comeback on the race courses for getting it wrong, and I personally don't think it's good enough.
And is that something that you feel is happening with more frequency over the last couple of years, be it climate change, be it the stipulations that race courses have to adhere to from the BHA, etc.? I mean, is there something that's increased in the last few seasons?
I don't know if it's about those things. I think one of the things that comes a long way down the list of some of these tracks, certainly not all of them, is turf management. And at the end of the day, the racing surface is the most important thing on any race course. And I think it's been overlooked on a number of occasions and not managed as it should. There's a number of courses now that don't even have their own clerk of the course. They share them. There's nobody there on a daily basis I just don't think it's good enough. And I say the racing surface is the racing surface. No trainer, and look, I didn't have runners, so I'm not backing myself up, should be used or criticised for not running a horse, because the hardest thing in the world is coming in the morning and picking up the pieces of the day that you shouldn't have run, But I think the racing surface is somewhat overlooked in the modern era.
Well, as you know, there are a number of wider subjects, and I know, as you rightly point out, no specifics in terms of anyone involved, but the spectre of Cheltenham continues to be something that we talk about in relation to the situation about horses not running at this point of the season or in the build-up to the festival. I mean, how do you view the influence of the Cheltenham Festival and those 4 days over the rest of the season?
I'm talking to the wrong person. It's gone way too far, and I find it baffling. Look, I'm not that involved. I'll run. I think we've proved when we've got the right one, we can go and we can run and we can run well. But for me, it's not the be all and end all in a million years. And to be honest, from September, October, a horse wins a race still, and everyone's talking about where it's going to go to Cheltenham at Cheltenham and what race it's going to run in and things like that. And it's overkill. It's too much. The press complain about people not running horses because they want to go to Cheltenham, and yet all they can talk about is what's going to run at Cheltenham. And God, some of the people that complain most about no runners have a programme called Road to Cheltenham. It's one race meeting in the year. Yeah, it's the biggest. I don't necessarily think it's the best on certain occasions, but there's an awful lot of racing, and a lot of it isn't used as much as it should be.
Yeah, I'll take your point, Donald. I mean, you look at some of the prize money that's on offer for something like a Triumph Hurdle or a County Hurdle. It's not even that fantastic, is it? But people just want to go for the prestige of the meeting.
No, and you saw the other day. I mean, we've been short of runners all year, and the first Cheltenham meeting, entries-wise, the ground wasn't great at all, and yet it's bombarded by entries, and nobody can look beyond running there. And a lot of the time, the prize money doesn't stack up. We get plenty of criticism, myself and Brian, for going elsewhere through the year and that sort of stuff. But if you look the large majority of the time, we're running for better money away from Cheltenham and Newbury and places like that, and doing what's best for your owners.
I was going to say, Cheltenham's not the only Grade 1 track that you could probably call out on this, isn't it?
But definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah. And it's if people looked into it a bit further. I mean, I was a big critic of ARC for a long time, but some of the money they're putting on at the smaller tracks is fantastic now. And you're going to those and getting criticised for going to those, and yet you earn for sometimes twice the money that you would be on a so-called Grade 1 track.
Without sort of asking you specifically, but are there various courses that you think are serial offenders when it comes to inaccurate ground description?
Well, yeah, there would be some. But I mean, I get baffled by some of the ground at the big southern tracks. When I go down there, I tend not to walk them because it horrifies me sometimes when you walk them compared with some of the tracks we're walking around the country, the ground that they produce. I mean, we talk about racing horses on good ground and things like that, and obviously last weekend, but you look at Cheltenham, you can't send a good ground horse to Cheltenham anymore at any point in the year. So if you're trying to buy horses like the big yards do to go to Cheltenham, and they're always going to race on a slowish surface, then why you've not got horses for when the same horses can't run on good ground or faster ground earlier in the year. And good ground, and unfortunately, good ground festivals are gone now, haven't they?
Pretty much, yeah.
Donald, obviously we could carry on talking about this, but I want to talk about you a little bit more. The last thing I want to ask you in general, though, because you've been involved in the game for such a long time, obviously the history of your family in the game. I
look like I've been in it in a long time.
With prize money, with field sizes, with issues with turf management, etc., do you recall the sport being in as precarious a position as it currently is at any previous time in your time in racing?
I don't think I've ever recall it being anywhere near as unsettled. I don't know if precarious is the right word. I don't know Obviously, days like Saturday, you can't defend days like Saturday at all, and things like that. The small fielder thing, I think, is slightly different. I think we're brainwashed by needing big field handicaps and that sort of stuff, and some of the best races I think to watch are some of the small field interesting races, the novice chases and so on. And this is a whole different subject, but we're losing novice chases all the time because people don't want small field races, and yet they want us to produce Saturday chasers without having the framework of racing to turn them into Saturday chasers anymore, and so on. So there's a bigger picture, and unfortunately, I don't think there's anybody really. Hopefully, it's going to change in charge of the whole situation, and there's too many. I've been in a couple of these meetings, and there's too many different parties looking after their own agenda issue, you know.
Well, the good thing is that if anyone wants a precedent for a bounce back, then they just have to look at Donald McCain over the last 6 or 7 years. Now, and the reason why, I mean, you may laugh, but genuinely, when we look at the numbers and your statistics, you look at the period through 2010 through to 2014, you know, the centuries, the good horses, etc. Then, of course, obviously, the well-documented, the horses from the Paul and Claire Rooney left the yard. And then you had to rebuild. And you had to be patient in that rebuild. So last season, when you clocked up 155 winners at a 23% strike rate, I mean, I know it's not all about the numbers for you. I know you said that. But that is some achievement, isn't it? To come back, roaring back like that.
Yeah, well, I never truthfully ever thought I'd train that number of winners again. 151 or 2 was my biggest, I think. But I never in a million years thought... And I wasn't concerned. I was comfortable with the fact I was never going to train that many winners again. And it just happened. To this day, I really don't know how. We just had a great year. They were running well all year, fresh faces. I think going forward, it's going to be difficult to do it again because, as in first time round, we wouldn't be a yard when a horse has won you. Say it's 2 bumpers and 3 novice hurdles in a season and it's got a daft handicap mark at the end of it. We're not going to then send that to the sales and buy a new one when one of my owners invests their 20, 50, whatever £1,000 in a horse. That's for the long term, you know. So obviously, it's common nature when they've won their early races. It's tough then because they're all handicappers and that sort of stuff, you know. But it was a great year, and it was just nice for all the people that stuck with us, especially the owners, the staff. Who a lot have been with me for a long time now. It was just a little bit of satisfaction. It was lovely.
Donald, I think I'm right in saying you haven't got the owners that would be prepared to splash out 400,000 or 500,000. You know, they're looking a little bit further down the pecking order. How do you find sourcing this new talent? You get quite a lot from the Irish point fields, don't you? And you seem to buy very economically and do really well with what you managed to get in there. Well,
needs must. It's become a bit of a standing joke with the lads in Ireland, to be honest. They've nicknamed me the buzzard or something because I'm always trying to find the value, because I generally don't go, a large majority of the time, I don't go to the sales with an order. I tend to do my homework, stand there and get to a point where I think a horse is possibly such good value that I can't not come home without him and then panic about finding an owner for him at a later date, you know. The easiest thing to do is not take any chances. And if you don't take any chances, you know, you're not going to train any winners. And I don't know, I'm a bit numb that way. You've got to have horses around. You can't win a war without soldiers. So you've got to have horses around. And I do get on very well with some of the lads in Ireland. I understand that it's Irishmen selling horses to an Englishman, but I have a good relationship with Colin Bowe and the Doyles, and I've become good friends with Derek O'Connor and that sort of stuff. And between us, it works well, you know. And I'd like to think for the mid-tier horse that isn't your 6-figure horse, and it might be a little bit too small or maybe not correct or might have had an issue along the way that is trainable and that sort of stuff, I'm probably one of their first phone calls, and that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, and obviously you're the advertisement for them, aren't you, with those mid-tier horses, because you seem to have a raft of them and they run up, you know, multiple winning sequences. So you're advertising their abilities as a production line as such.
That's what they tell me. Yeah, they say what works for me works for them as well. Yeah, and they say, look, would I like? Look, it got me into a lot of trouble first time around when an owner came along that allowed you to buy the horse that you really wanted to train at the sales, and we produced some very good horses doing it. But would it be nice when you get those phone calls to be able to sort of say yes straight away? And we're still not in that position. We're still a good way behind a lot of people on spending, but that's fine. We're comfortable where I've got some fantastic owners, and they've supported me well. So that's as important to me as any of it.
Well, also important, Donald, is to have those good horses to campaign as well. I mean, who would you consider? I mean, in the old days, it was easy to identify the sort of leaders of the Donald McCain pack when it was, Peddler's Cross, for example. I mean, who are the horses that you look to advertise you at the highest level this coming season?
Well, I mean, obviously, we've still got. I'd love to have one of those back now. Any one of them, I don't mind which one. But it's still a team of young horses. Manila Drama, I think, has a big day in him. It didn't quite work out the other day. He would have been a good second on Saturday, but for making a mistake at the second last and coming to a standstill. Obviously, the winner was very impressive. He's a big day horse and there's a big day in him, but typical of the type we have to buy. He's a little bit wild, he's a little bit feral, and he's just easy to deal with on certain occasions. But there's youngsters coming through. I've been very impressed with Maximilian. He doesn't do an awful lot when he gets to the front, but he keeps winning. That's the main thing. And there's a team of young horses coming through, and like I say, we've been supported well, and there's an awful lot of horses we haven't run yet.
You're obviously giving the owners group, a great value for money really with Maximilian. Obviously, he's got a phenomenal strike rate, 4 from 4. You got anything in the back of your mind for him moving forwards?
Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of thought we'd work back from the Grade 2 at Haydock. I always forget what it's called. It's not the Rendlesham, it's one of the other ones that Wymot won. And then also, obviously, just before that, there's the River Don that's an option. I've actually found it. I had tried to have a look the other day, and between now and the new year, there's very few. I'd love to find a nice stay in Novice Hurdle for him somewhere, and there's very few. I think the only one is the Ballymore, is it, at Cheltenham or something like that?
Hello, with Cheltenham on the agenda?
Well, it's always been against my nature to go there until you really need to go, if that makes sense. I was quite happy to always stay away from there till the biggest day. But we might have to think about it because there's not that many other options.
Can I ask you about one horse who's earned his place in my affections, and he produced a tremendous performance off a long layoff in Nayati. Then he went to Cheltenham, and I thought he ran pretty well at Cheltenham, and then of course came out and won again. So how satisfying was it? 1,000 days that Nayati had off the track?
Yeah, just over. Yeah, and look, I hold my hand up. There was a couple of times I tried to retire him, but like I say, the lads invested in the horse, and that was their horse, and there was no chance of there being another one at the time. So, we got him back, and it was quite a strange injury, one I'd never really heard of, and it took an awful long time. But he was quite a high-profile horse before we got him. He was a Gretchen Parkin horse with Alan King, and obviously the wheels fell off a bit, and I don't know. I don't think they need 3 years off, but obviously a bit of time's done him no harm, and we found a way of riding him now that he enjoys. He was a bit unlucky at Cheltenham. He never really got a run wherever he went, and he's turned into a grand horse, yeah, and a great horse to now run in Saturday handicaps, and that's as we discussed. It's nice to have a few of them around the place. Just
mentioning about the ride, obviously, and that brings us to Brian Hughes, and that relationship and the satisfaction of being associated with someone who's now, like you, he's elevated himself to the top level. He's become a champion as well. I mean, what's that working relationship like, and what joy did you get seeing him win the title?
I got huge satisfaction last year from seeing it. Yeah, I went down. We ran one on the Saturday. Obviously because we wanted to run it, but also because I wanted to go down and see him get his trophy. Look, do we go out for meals regularly and that sort of stuff? No, he will when he's down here and that sort of thing. But it's become a really good working relationship. My trainer jockey mentality's become slightly tainted, or was slightly tainted for different reasons, obviously. But we're getting on really well. I think it was wouldn't have been the easiest start because the horses weren't running that well to start with when he came, and I think he's adjusted slightly to the way I do things, and I've also adjusted slightly to the way he does things, and we've met in the middle, and it's working really well. And what I've found now is I mean, I used to be all about the one day and not worry about the next, but the horses are lasting longer, and that's the proof of a season like last season. You know, they come back, they come back bouncing, they're ready to go again, and I don't think it's till you're really truly involved with Brian that you realise how good he is at his art, if that makes any sense. And he's the best around.
I was going to ask, really, Donald, other than his outstanding riding ability, what else does he bring to the team? You know, what other components make Brian Hughes the champion he is?
Well, I've never met anyone as driven as him since AP. He can't think about anything else, and obviously, you know, his work ethic is second to none. He knows the program book inside out to a fault sometimes, and that sort of stuff. Not great for a jockey, but you know, and he knows his horses and he studies his form. He's just a racing anorak, and he can't think beyond anything else. I think he settled down a little bit. Obviously, he's got a young family, and things are going great at home and that sort of stuff. And I think probably for the first time, Brian, I've got this right. Brian kind of built himself a career with no one great job to stand by him, if you know what I mean. And he kept an awful lot of people happy for a long time. And I think now, with a yard of our size, he can just relax a little bit more. Nobody knows somebody's got his back, and you know, we're all working for the same thing, and I think that's done him good as well.
Yeah, he knows that you're going to produce a certain, you know, percentage of winners for him, and that's almost safe. And you never say verbatim, but you know, history is telling us that once you get on this sort of gradient, that it just keeps climbing. So fingers crossed that continues for a while.
Pressure's on me now, not him.
Yeah.
Donald, do you have anything for us to keep an eye out for in this week ahead? And given your current strike rate, we have got pens and papers at the ready.
No, not really. That's not going to help. But what we've got coming out over the next couple of weeks, we've got a huge team of fresh horses. Now the ground's coming. We've got Bangor at the weekend, and I've got a whole stack of novice hurdlers to start running. I always find these are all pointers basically, and we always find you learn about them as you go along, and you learn about them with racing and so on. But a slightly different bunch to the ones I've had before. We've tried to buy more of a winter chasing type of pointers. So there's some big immature horses ready to come out, and I might have to change the way we do it a little bit and be a little bit more patient and just let them slot into line carefully. So, you know, they might not come out and win the bumpers or novice hurdles first time, but they're an interesting bunch of horses, and we're really looking forward to them.
Are you comfortable with that sea change, Donald? Because obviously, you know, you do really well with these horses, and they run up sequences. Are you happy enough to take that more patient approach, perhaps? Does it sit comfortably?
I might go back to plan A if it doesn't work out. But look, people want a longer term sort of horse, and you know, that's so we've invested a little bit more and that sort of stuff, and it'll be interesting. You know, it's the job's all about chasers at the end of the day, whichever way we look at it, and that's why I get a bit frustrated with the novice chase system, because it becomes harder every year to produce them and bring them on. But we are where we are, and we've got to get on with it.
Donald, thank you very much for joining us. I know it's very busy. You've got a lot of horses to train, a lot of horses coming out in the next few weeks. So we really appreciate the time. Well done on a fabulous record last season. Good luck with all your horses for the coming season, and especially at Bangor this weekend. We'll be keeping an eye out for them.
Thank you. All the best.
Cheers, Donald.
Cheers, Donald. Thank you very much to Donald McCain for joining us on Racing Weekly. Well, thanks very much to Donald McCain for joining us on Racing Weekly. A really fascinating, insightful chat from Donald. But before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know of Bet365's ITV racing offer. If you back a winner of 4-1 or more, place a bet on the next live ITV race and get your money back if it loses. That money's Back up to £50 and applies to the first single bet placed. Bet restrictions and T's and C's apply. New and eligible customers only. But time now to look ahead to what promises to be a pretty good weekend of racing at Newbury. Fingers crossed, the ground's okay, Sam, for everyone to take their chance. The big race is the Gold Cup on Saturday. Yeah. I found it hard to get really enthusiastic right now, because obviously the makeup of the field is a little bit dubious. But what about the quality of the field? I mean, there are some useful horses in this contest, but in the old days, you used to have a potential
Possible
Gold Cup
horse, yeah. Yeah, we did.
You got a Gold Cup horse here?
No, not. It looks a good quality handicap without having.
So Korak Rambler's your 6 to 1 favourite.
I got Jadami beating this off about 10 stone 3, so you never know, do you?
Well, those quality of horses, Jadami, One Man, etc.
I know. Well, they might. I mean,
Denman.
There was a potential Gold Cup horse in the field, wasn't a Protectorate, but he chose to win a Betfair Chase instead. So
let's spin through the market. Korak Rambler 6 to 1 favourite with Bet365, remastered 50 to 2, 3 under, 3-5, 10 to 1. Lamilos 10s, Fiddler on the Roof 12s, Oscar Elite 12s, Our Power, Bustleton all 12s. What do you?
Friend of the show, Peter Scudamore, said to me that he wouldn't be too concerned if the ground was genuinely good at Newbury for Korak Rambler. So I think if you are having an anti-post play this week, providing they get the 20 mil of rain, which is forecast, I think, hopefully the ground will be genuinely good. I think Keith Otterson will do his best, having learnt from, not the failings of Ascot, but the misfortune perhaps of Ascot last week, the challenges, nice word, that, it's really, really important that we have, ground that connections are happy with. Good ground can be, good fast ground can be safe ground.
Yes.
It's not unsafe, is it? It's just...
There is rain forecast during the week.
Yeah, 5 and 6 mils on 3 days,
How did he describe the ground as a hungry hippo?
Yeah, I thought, to me, I saw the headline, I thought it was about you. But no, he...
Is that entirely necessary?
I
don't think so.
My worry is that the previous meeting there, when they had the chases, they had an inch and a half of rain perhaps the night before or something like that, and it was still good to firm, and they were taking horses out. So that's the major concern. So I've sort of based any form study on genuine good ground. I can't see how it's going to be much softer than that. No,
I agree. With that in mind,
I think Korak Rambler's a player, as long as he doesn't get too far back.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to make ground up in this race. We saw that last year with Cloth Cap, Fiddler on the Roof, horses that jump well, get into a rhythm. I know you could say that for any chase, basically, but obviously Korak Rambler had the hill at Cheltenham to get on top. I mean, the burst that he put in was astonishing in that handicap back in March. I do think he's a quality horse. Running him over 2.5 at Carlisle was just a pipe opener. I'm pretty sure they're happy with his preparation, so I think he's a decent starting point in the race. The two that do take my eye a little bit are Bustleton, who we've seen plenty of, but he is a good ground horse. Obviously, he won the Kerry National for the second year running. He got a bit lucky because Hewitt came down at the last, but even if he got beaten half a length by Hewitt, it's still a tremendous run.
Excellent.
Stays well, loves good ground. I know it's a cliche, nice racing weight, but he looks as though this race has been the plan for some little time, and I think unusually conditions will probably play to his strength. The other one I quite liked was Our Power.
Okay.
Of Sam Thomas's. Obviously, he only beat Danny Kerwin at Ascot. I say only. Danny Kerwin's a talented horse, but he can curl up when the pressure is fully exerted. And he was 11 lengths behind Korak Rambler in that Cheltenham race. But I like the fact he's won around the track. I think he's a better flat track horse. He's obviously a good ground horse as well. He copes well with good ground. The only thing is who would ride, whether it be Sam Twiston-Davies or Charlie Deutsch, because I think they might have been claimed by respective others. But he sort of had to win at Ascot to get into this race, so it has been a plan. It's not as if this is a secondary thought. I thought he was a big price.
Okay. I've made a note of all those: Korak Rambler, Bustleton, Our Power. I liked 3 under 3-5. I just felt there's progression. And I like the way he races. Suggests to me there's a little bit more in the locker, which is definitely what you need in this sort of race. And the other one that I'll mention, and I think it's got to mention in the press today, it's a horse that has been dear to my heart for a long time. Unfortunately, he never lived up to the reputation that I thought when he won the Betfair Chase a couple of years ago. I thought Lost in Translation was going to be a superstar. Last year, he did show that there was still a bit of juice left in him. I think he won at Ascot and thought maybe things were turning the corner. But if it is proper, decent, good ground on the weekend, I think that will suit him.
He's looking well handicapped again now.
I think he's down to 150, is
150, yeah.
150. He's 33-1 with Bet365. And Sam, Freddie Gingell is going to take the ride. He's 16 years old. He's obviously going to take some handy weight off Lost in Translation's back. But he's clearly talented, young rider.
He is very,
bred
very
for
talented.
The job.
He is bred for the job, for sure. He's getting some good opportunities at Ditchy, as well as, obviously, with Joe Tizard as well. You know, one or two rides where he probably feels he could have done a little bit better as well in recent times, but it's a learning curve for him. He's 16 years of age, and I think he came in and held his hands up after one at Wincanton.
Which I like.
That self-awareness at that age is quite extraordinary, and especially we seem to be in a time where people are looking to shift the blame onto other people or onto other things, but the fact that he came in and held his hands up showed a great maturity, and hopefully he can make it.
Yeah, fake news. Okay, so that's a look at the big race on Saturday. On Friday, the big race is the long distance hurdle. Proshima heads the market 9-4 with Bet365. Looks an improved horse again. I think he's got better with every season. That was an excellent performance at Wetherby.
It was, you know, the way he cantered through the race and saw the race out really well, which is almost my slight concern with Proshima, that did he actually get every inch of that 3 miles?
Yeah.
But he seemed to at Wetherby. I think this would be a different kettle of fish for him. He hasn't traditionally produced his best at Newbury, both on the flat and over hurdles. So there's a little bit of question mark there. I thought Champ might be the one. I know he's 10 years of age now, but he obviously had the Champ on him, didn't he, in that works morning at Newbury. He probably went through his paces there. I think AP expressed himself very happy with Champ's condition. Perhaps first time out is a time to catch him at Newbury. Fingers crossed he runs if the ground's not too quick.
Okay. Something to bear in mind, obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
But it looks a good race, assuming that the majority of those horses, especially with Paisley Park and Thomas Darby involved, etc.
Yes.
So,
I find those races almost impossible to unravel.
Yes.
Most definitely, because I think they're almost like 5 furlong sprints, those staying. And we can get false paces and all sorts of things.
Dashel Drasher's in there, so hopefully he will take them along.
Yeah,
as he
grand to see him win, wasn't it?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, absolutely. One other race we definitely must mention on the weekend, and that's the Fighting Fifth at Newcastle. So Epatante has been targeted in that race, but it's possible that she may face Constitution Hill. I mean, who knows?
Well,
who knows?
The ground is currently soft, and they're going to get loads of rain. So I don't think there's any chance that Newcastle's going to be fast with loads of withdrawals. It might be too deep.
Soft.
It might be too soft.
Too soft.
Don't start that. So, I mean, Epatante, obviously, this has been a target for some little time. She was a bit disappointing when we last saw her at Punchestown, but she'd probably gone over the top a little bit, and she was exhilarating, wasn't she, at Aintree?
Very good,
hammering on morale. And we had the real Epatante back last year, I think. You know, she hurdled slicker. She was more fluent. She, those back ailments seem to be behind her, and fingers crossed that's still the case.
All right. Anything else to mention for the week ahead that you think might be worthy of a tickle?
Everything's always worth a tickle, Rish. You know that. The 12:45 on Friday.
Don't get too close to Sam Turner.
I haven't got wandering hands. That 12:45 at Newbury, I think that's a novices limited handicap chase. Interesting horse in there, Dad's All Right Gino. I mean, the stable can do little wrong this autumn. Jamie Snowden having a great run of it. Second at Boot Hill at New Nabbit, then bolted up at Chepstow. Has gone up 9 for that, which is a little punitive, but looks a horse going the right way. And when you've got yards that are on a roll like Jamie Snowden at the moment, I think he was a very interesting runner on Friday. All
right. Also, watch out for Fanion d'Estraval would be one. Has won that race, the handicap chase at Newbury before. Venetia Williams had her first winner since April, first jumps winner since April. On the weekend when Fontaine Calange did me on the big breakaway at Haydock. That was heartbreaking. What a great ride by Brendan Powell, the runner-up there. But no money for the win place. Never mind. But Fanion d'Estraval is obviously, with her stable now rolling along, hopefully there's more to come.
Hopefully it'll run. We might see Stage Star as well on Friday afternoon as well.
Okay.
And then Novices Chase. I mean, that if they say we were going to get the runners that are entered, Beauport, the Carlisle winner, City Chief, perhaps Harper's Brook, who travelled like a dream. I think it's definitely a horse to keep. I mean, talking about stables in form, Ben Pauling.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the future blueprint, isn't it? Go and train on a golf course. It's the future for you.
It'd
be great, wouldn't it?
Nothing better than that.
More golf
Can we
and less
move this
training.
podcast to a golf course?
Yeah.
I think
Why
that could
not?
work. That could work.
Let's speak to the paymasters.
Yeah, Cher is out to make amends for
Yes.
the unseated at Cheltenham in that handicap hurdle as well. So
Yeah.
there
are some stars out.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'm not going to write that again though.
No, I was
The national season starts here.
When I said Shearer, I thought it was an apt opportunity for you
Yeah.
to do that. In fact, I think the owner, Max McNeil, says that if he wins, he will give it the celebration.
Round the winners enclosure?
Yeah.
That I want to see.
I don't know, I think I preferred that. He said he was going to give it that.
Oh, the double?
Yeah, it wasn't...
He says it's very much the Blackburn version, not the Newcastle version.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
maybe you did used to go with the two arms up. I can't remember. I'd give it the Mickey Shannon, I would.
Of course you would.
That was the best celebration
What
ever,
was it, Steve Bull's?
Steve, well, when he got 3, it was the aeroplane.
Okay.
He got plenty of 3s.
He did get plenty of 3s. Prefer the Dwight York.
We score 3 a season now.
Well, that is it. Sam, thank you very much.
World Cup?
I've had a bet on Portugal.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, Wolves FC.
Who do you think wins the World Cup?
It's difficult to look past Brazil. They've got a bit of everything.
Of course it's
haven't
difficult, but what are they, 7-2?
All right, Spain are the best European Spain.
Yeah, okay.
Well, they're third favourites.
Are they? Oh,
Probably.
We've covered all 3. Chuck England.
Argentina have got a chance of that. Denmark as outsiders.
Who's playing for Brazil? Socrates,
Zico.
Falcao, Josimar, all my favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. Taparel.
They were great days, by the way.
What a team.
Let's not reminisce too much because it's time to look forward as we say goodbye to Sam Turner. We're closing off this episode of Racing Weekly. This show, of course, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Thanks so much to Donald McCain for joining us earlier today. And obviously, every day is a busy day for Donald McCain, but he spared the time to give us some really good insight into the world of horse racing and his own world of horse racing. As always, if you like what you've heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then please leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. Indeed, I enjoyed engaging with 1 or 2 people on the YouTube comment section last week. We will be back next week when we'll be looking ahead to the Tingle Creek meeting at Sandown. But from Sam, myself, and the Racing Weekly team, bye-bye.